Week 9 is in the books, and what a week it was. Welcome to the Wildcard Rewind podcast. Let's get into it.
I just want to rewind to when we were young and hard. Back to all those good times. Take me back to the start.
Sometimes I wish the name of our podcast wasn't so hard to say on a recording, but it is nonetheless. Week 9 is in the books. It was absolutely fantastic. And just as fantastic is the guest that we are being joined by today. We are without Hannah for the next few weeks as she is off doing a tour of America with her job. But also in the meantime, got to see the Bengals absolutely blow out the Raiders yesterday. So very glad that it went well for her. That does mean, though, that for the next few weeks, you are left with the best two. Paul, lovely to see you, man. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm top of the world. I don't follow soccer anymore. I say soccer. Don't follow soccer. It's crap. And the Cardinals won. Whoa, come on.
Wasn't going to bring it up because I got
it in before you would. So.
We're not a Premier League podcast, but it's fine. So I obviously teased at the beginning the guest that we have on joining us today. You have joined us before. He is absolutely fantastic, a wealth of knowledge. People have described him as the queen of fantasy football. Murph, thank you so much for joining us. How are you doing, man?
I just love the upgrade from village idiot to queen in one evening. It must be a Halloween special, eh? I know it's just gone, so I'll take it as that. And we're here on double digits starting tomorrow. So we're in almost like the back nine of the season. It's scary how quick it's gone.
It's absolutely mad how quickly it goes and how quickly you're looking and thinking, oh, these dynasty rosters, like I need to start making a decision on. And then you're already starting to see, like on your redraft rosters, people starting to stop pay attention. We've got to the stage in the season that if you're 2 games under 500, people are going, never mind. But it goes so quickly. You are absolutely right. How has the season been treating you in general, Murph? I think the last time that we spoke might have been in the off season, or it might have been the beginning of the season. But how has your fantasy season been treating you?
It's been good. I think the work I did this off season was pretty good. I feel comfortable with most of the teams I have qualified for the Scott Fishbowl playoffs. Like I know you have, Lewis, as well. So, things are going well. I'm riding high in the JTT Cup. I'm first in Battle of the Sexes as it stands right now. There's definitely been some highs, few lows, but not too many this year. A lot of competitive teams I have. Very few are out of the mix. The dynasty rosters look good. I took over a dynasty team in Kev runs, or a league that Kev runs, and that's top of the tree right now. So yeah, things are good. A lot of injuries, so it's now this management part of it. So this is an interesting part. So I always think November is the time that you win leagues, because this is where the engagement drops off. It's literally from today, tomorrow onwards, the engagement drops off. The casuals start to drip out where their leagues are go down the pan. They don't play very many leagues. And luckily here in the UK, we have a really integral community where lots of people play multiple leagues. So it's slightly different. But if you have a big, I don't want to say big following in the US, but if you have a following in the US and you have the more casual players, a lot of them do dip out about now because they're like, well, okay, my team's not going to make the playoffs, so I don't care. And it's like, that's it. And they kind of just go down the pan. And you start to see less action and you can get some really good value. So if you're really like in that 500 hunt, 1 game under or sitting around 500, then you're this is your time to really push in and make moves, because you're probably going to get the teams that are nearing the playoffs, and you'll have a few that are in clinching scenarios soon, won't be as active because they won't want to waste the fab. Those at the bottom won't be involved. So there'll be a pool. It'll be a really small pool of active waiver wire players. And this is where you can make those trades and make those really big pushes. So this is the exciting part. November for me is where a lot of leagues get won and lost. A lot of people think it's the playoffs. I think it's this window now. There's a lot of times where I've turned rosters with 2 wins into championship rosters in the next like 2 to 3 week window that you're going to have.
Yeah, 100%. I often think back to my oldest home league, which is only an 8-team league with a bunch of people from school, which has been going for a fair few years now. I won my first title either 2020 or 2021. And the roster that won the title, and it was a complete blowout in the final, and there was one player that I drafted on it. And there was only 2 players on there that had actually been drafted. Like by the time that I was in the championship, I remember you can probably date it if you have the memory that it was Eckler was out for the Chargers and Justin Jackson was the starter and went off for like 30 points in week 17. I know I had Antonio Brown and the Bucks on that team. Like it was full of people that not only had I not drafted, but like no one had drafted. But by being smart and playing the waiver wire, and those players are out there this year. Like we don't quite know who they're going to be. You can start to theorize around it, but being active now, like as we always say, you just have to make the playoffs. And once you've made playoffs, everything becomes a crapshoot from there. So it is a very, very fun time of the season. Yeah. We do have, so to start to think about our big news of the week, and there was some relatively big news this week. Sometimes we find ourselves scrambling around for little injuries around the league to see, we can talk about Rashid Shaheed a little bit, or, we can figure out who we're going to talk about. There was some big news. Before we get on to that, the buys for next week, there's a few fancy relevant players, basically 2 fancy relevant teams, 2 not so much. So the Browns and the Raiders being the not so much, and then the Packers and the Seahawks on bye next week. But the biggest news of this week was Dak Prescott. And it was a very strange injury because he went out with a hand problem and then was ruled out with a hamstring issue, which didn't seem to make a lot of sense. We have now had confirmation. We don't know the exact nature of how long he's going to miss, but he's going to miss several weeks with the hamstring injury. Now, obviously, the problem with this for the Cowboys is that they are currently sat with a losing record and a fair few games out of the division, which is really being fought between the Commanders and the Eagles currently. So there's a chance that they could just sit Dak for the season, because by the time he comes back, if it's 3-4 weeks, there's probably nothing to play for. My question to you both, and we'll come to you first, Murph. What are your thoughts on Ceedee Lamb in this period, rest of season, without Dak Prescott, or just for the next few weeks without him?
Yeah, I think there's always this tendency, right, to be really worried when something like this happens. And when you've seen what happened in Miami with Tyreek, for example, people are going to point to that and go, well, Ceedee Lamb's going to fall off a cliff. It's not quite the same, because there's actually, you're saying, Lewis, there's not a lot to play for. I completely disagree. I actually think they've got a lot to play for, because Mike McCarthy's in the last year of his contract. So he's playing for his job. He can't afford to just throw the season away because he's not getting another job. So actually, I think they're going to play hard. And I think that they know that Ceedee Lamb is their guy. That's the person who they know is going to get them out of this hole. Now, I did a bit of analysis on this. Ceedee Lamb has played 17 full games. I'm not counting the games where Dak Prescott's gone down like yesterday, but he's played 17 full games without Dak Prescott. In that span, he had 82 catches, 994 yards, and 7 touchdowns. He also had 84 yards in rushing as well. So we should see some Ceedee Lamb rushing upside here. That was broken up with 1 100-yard game, 6 more games of 75 yards as well. But 11 of those games came in his rookie season. So a lot of those low-performing games actually came as he was a rookie and he was still adjusting to the NFL. And so he's actually played quite a few games with Cooper Rush, not Cooper Cup. And so with those 6 games that have happened outside of his rookie year, he actually has a stat line of 57 targets, 37 catches, 492 and 2. And then he's also got 3 attempts at rushing for 15 yards and 1. So 3 touchdowns in 6 games. It's not bad. If you extrapolate that out over a season, he's on that sort of bottom end wide receiver 1, high end wide receiver 2 number. So I don't think you're going to have the cause to panic. Now, listen, he's not going to be putting up the same numbers he has done. But given the target deficiency there, then the fact there's not really enough competition, they're going to get the ball to him. He will run the ball. He'll just be almost like that Deebo Samuel role kind of is in San Francisco. I expect to see a bit of that. He'll run the ball more. They'll try and just put the ball in his hands any which way. And the pleasing thing is as well, is there's been a high volume of targets in the games since his rookie year. You know, he's averaging 9.5 targets a game. So the volume's there. Yes, the yardage needs to pick up a little bit, but it's not terrible, and the touchdowns aren't terrible. So I actually think it's okay. It's not great, but it's not a Tyreek situation where we're talking about unstartable for fantasy. He's going to be okay. And this whole, again, I think I just want to stress is that Mike McCarthy is playing for his job. So he's not going to sit them. They're going to play every week. And he has to play to win, even if they're not going to make the playoffs. He needs to be as close to missing the playoffs as possible. If he misses by one game, he can say, that Prescott injury, that's what cost me. That cost me my win. And so that's what he's playing for now. So I think that the hardest thing is we don't know who's going to start. But for Ceedee Lamb owners, you don't want Trey Lance. You want it to be Cooper Rush. We know what that story is. It's not huge, but it's not bad. If Trey Lance comes in with the legs and the rushing ability, that's where I'd sort of move him further down towards bottom end of RB2 because wide receiver 2, because I'm not sure that passing volume will be the same. So that I do think they'll keep Cooper Rush because I think he's as similar to Dak, and you won't have to change the playbook too much.
Yeah, I think that's completely fair. And actually, when you look across the season, because I was intrigued, because Ceedee Lamb obviously isn't having the best season currently. I mean, he's currently sat as the wide receiver 4, but it hasn't really felt like it. It was basically one huge game. He's had, excuse me, 2 games inside the top 12, 2 outside the top 40. So it's been sort of reliable peaks and troughs. So, you know, that drop off actually isn't a huge difference. Like the upside is capped, but it's not a huge difference where it is currently. What are your thoughts, Paul, on sort of Ceedee Lamb's value, especially with Dak out, but also do you think this is absolute? You know, do you think this could be wheels up for Rico Dowdle coming off a good game last week, or Zeke or Delvin Cook maybe if they have to lean on the ground game a little more if they can't get it done through the air? Or do you think the Cowboys offense basically just stays the same if they stick with Cooper Rush at quarterback?
Yeah, I think they stick with Cooper Rush, like Murph said. I think he's the most like for like player with sort of Dak. Like they don't have to really change that much. And I think when it comes to Ceedee Lamb, I think, you know, he's such a talented wide receiver that he's kind of QB proof. It doesn't matter who's throwing him the ball, as long as it's somewhere near, he's going to catch it, you know, and he's going to demand them targets because there's no, like you said, there's nobody challenging him for that wide receiver 1 role in that team, like, you know. But I think they might try and be clever with this now with Cooper Rush. I think they may start doing a bit like the Saints do, and where they'll bring in somebody like Trey Lance if they're at the 5-yard, you know, 3rd and goal on the 5-yard. I think they'll bring him in and maybe try a trick play where he's either going to run it or they're just going to, you know, just dink one over the top or something like that. So I think we'll see a bit of Trey Lance, but I don't think we'll see too much. I think Cooper Rush is the one that's going to be running the ball. And like Murph said, I think him with Ceedee Lamb with him, I think he is still a start for me. And he's going to be very, very hard to bench. Even with Trey Lance there, I think he's going to be somebody that you're going to start the next 2 weeks because of the profile of player that he is. You're going to be, if you find somebody out there that Trey Lance starts next week that benches Ceedee Lamb and he flops, fair play to you, because Ceedee Lamb is somebody you always start your best players, and you know, he is somebody that you're going to start.
We should mention that he might not play on Sunday because he is listed officially as week to week with a shoulder injury. So there is always that caveat of how injured. But I know the one thing is, you know, a lot of people, again, will see that news and the cynicism is going to be dripped in. Oh, well, the Cowboys are packing up for the year and they're going to bench Ceedee Lamb and they're just going to phone it in. I tell you now, that is not going to happen. They can, like Mike McCarthy is not going to... Now, if they sack Mike McCarthy tomorrow, all bets are off. Right? If Mike McCarthy goes in the next week, which I don't think it will happen because he's out of contract at the end of the year, they're not. All bets are off with this, but I definitely don't think they're going to phone it in, because the coaching staff won't allow it. They won't allow it because they're all playing for their jobs. So it's a very different situation to, say, what happens under like Jonathan Gannon last year, where you had significant injuries in Arizona, and there were times that players were held out when there were slight niggles because they're like, this is a lost season. Like we'll just get through it. Jonathan Gannon's not on the hot seat. It's accepted what's going on. So we won't put the players through the paces and risk injury. And they benefited from that. You know, the Cardinals came back healthy this year. They're on a bit of a roll. So, you know, it's the right decision for some teams, but it's not right now for Dallas.
The Cardinals
2025.
It's all right. I'm gonna temper that later on. Don't worry, Paul.
The Cardinals, by the way, just to let you know, Paul, we have some breaking news that you've traded for Baron Browning, the edge rusher from the Denver Broncos. Obviously not fancy relevant to our show because we're not an IDP show, but just to let you know that the Cardinals have made a trade. And Paul goes to get his phone to see if that player is any good.
He's a good player. Baron Browning's a decent player. It's a 6th round pick as well. It's a very good acquisition, I think, for the Cardinals. It's a problem position. They've not filled it well. And I think really you're looking at the Cardinals and you're thinking of that roster and you're thinking they could be wildcard relevant, division relevant, whatever. So they, you know, a 6th round pick, they're not getting a better player than Baron Browning in. So I do like this trade. I was a bit surprised that Sean Payton and the Broncos did let him go, but it is a position of depth for them. So he's not been getting the snap share that you would kind of expect.
Yeah. And they immediately announced, Jonathan Cooper being signed to a 4-year extension. So it's a case of we have depth, we have the replacement in-house, or we have a starter ahead of him in-house.
Just to give you a bit of encouragement, Paul, that the last time Denver made a move like this where they let a prominent like edge rusher go, it was Shaq Barrett, and the following season he went on to the Pro Bowl and All Pro.
So I thought you were going to mention Von Miller.
But that was
Von
after.
Miller. Oh, was that after?
Yeah. Shaq Barrett was first. Shaq Barrett went 20. I think he went in free agency actually, but
yeah,
I think the Bucs signed him in 2018. I think Von Miller went 2020, 2021. It was during COVID, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was that. It was the Super Bowl run. It was like week 7 of the Super Bowl season. It's good that we both won Super Bowls recently, Murph. That was fun.
Mic unplugged there. So yeah, look, I think it's amazing that the Broncos have a history of doing this, but take it positively because actually it's good news. It's good news for you.
100%.
Let's crack on with some more of the breaking news. So the other big injury that we saw, and this was quite a nasty one, was Chris Olave with the concussion. Now we haven't heard anything yet about, obviously, because he'll be in the concussion protocol, so we won't know yet whether or not he's going to miss time. But it looked like a nasty one, and I think it's something like 5 concussions since 2020 for Chris Olave. So obviously, prayers for him and hope that he's okay.
We're talking about Loa 2.0. We were 2.0.
I would say, so I actually looked at this and he got a concussion against the Bucs in that big blowout a couple of weeks ago. And then he left the game last week with a suspected concussion. So there's this, this should not, I would be surprised if he makes it for this week. In fact, I'd be surprised to see him before the bye. They've got a week 12 bye. So I'd expect now with Dennis Allen fired, I think they'll shut him down until the bye. So I think fantasy managers should prepare that he sits the next 2 weeks and then you got the bye and then he's back for your fantasy playoffs.
So my question then is, obviously, the Saints, as you said, they just fired Dennis Allen. The team is really struggling. They are one of the contenders for the first overall pick. Do you think, so obviously this puts them without their top 2 pass catchers with Rashid Shaheed out for the year as well. Is there anyone that you're interested in that Saints wide receiver core, or do you think Alvin Kamara just gets a million targets and Taysom Hill as well? Paul, I'm going to come to you first. I saw you shaking your head.
No, I don't want any part of this team now. I think it's a bit of a shit show. And exactly what you were saying about the Cowboys? Do they start saying, "Oh, we're not going to bring him back. We've got nothing to play for"? I think the Saints are exactly what you were saying, Murph. They're going to bring in a new head coach. They've got absolutely nothing to play for. There's nobody on the hot seat or anything like this. Why bring somebody like Chris Olave back or anything like that? Why do you want any part of this? They're not playing to go and win a couple of games, because what's winning a couple of games going to do for them? Maybe go from having the first pick to the 5th pick or something like that. Why not just go? It's all done. We are done for the season. We want that 101. We can get the best value for a 101. Go and get it. Don't want anything to do with it apart from anyone called Alvin Kamara. And that's because Super Camario is he's just going to see so much volume now that it's unbelievable.
It was something like 240 scrimmage yards this week, which was absolutely unbelievable. But that's because the entire offense runs through him, because there's no one else. But I know, Murph, that you have someone that you are interested in. Now, I'm intrigued to know how interested, whether it's it's wheels up for this guy, or whether it's hey, if you're struggling, this is someone you can pick up off waivers.
Yeah, I'd add him, right? So I put Mason Tipton, right? So I like chaos players. I like players that have a ridiculously high ceiling. He slots into this. He slots into this Rashid Shaheed role. That is where he's playing. So listen, he had 3 targets on Sunday, 0 catches. So he's not on anyone's radar. I'll tell you this now: there's no one in the world on a podcast anywhere this week that is going to be talking about Mason Tipton, right? But I am. Because I lean into the going away. I lean into the contrarian, because, and listen, I caveat this with, if you're in a super shallow league, don't do this. Don't do this in a super shallow league. But if you are in a league where you're contending, and you're struggling with injuries, and everyone on your bench is meh. You've got like Braylon Allen, you've got like Antonio Gibson, and you've got all these sort of like handcuffy players, but you have to start one of them. This is where I'd be throwing Mason Tipton in, because he's the sort of guy that will have a 3 for 139 and 2 day. Like, and with Chris Olave, I don't think Chris Olave comes back until the bye. They got no one catching the football. Yeah, it's going to be Super Camario all day long. I'm on that. Taysom Hill will get a bit of work until he gets injured again in like 2 weeks' time. But they're going to have to go for this deep threat. And actually, Paul, I'm going to disagree with you slightly on nothing to play for, because Darren Rizzi now, the special teams coordinator, is the interim head coach. Now, we've seen in the league that these interim head coaches are getting the job. So Antonio, we're talking about Antonio Pierce at the Raiders, did a great job. He had a bit of a longer time. Darren Rizzi, right, from experience, this guy is, I'm not going to say he's quite like Dan Campbell, but he's a pumped up, fired dude. I'll give you an example. If you want to go and find the video, do you remember last year, week 18, where Dennis Allen goes and apologizes to Arthur Smith for that touchdown that was scored, and it was done in like poor taste and running up the score, right? And he's like, I'm so sorry, Arthur, that my team, they didn't listen to me, and they I'm really sorry that my guys, they wanted to score a touchdown and score their bonuses, they're selfish, blah, blah, blah. Darren Rizzi goes straight up to Arthur Smith and just pokes him in the face, and he's like, in his face, like, stop whinging.
Yeah.
And like, he is a proper animated coach. Like, he is not going to allow for this apathy to be going on. It's a talent poor roster, right? Lots of injuries. The salary cap situation's a nightmare. They're not trading for anyone. But Derek Carr's got to justify his contract. Like, there's going to be pieces coming in. They're going to have a high pick. They could take a quarterback. So Derek Carr is playing for his job. And Darren Rizzi's going to say, right, listen, you got 7 games to save a job. It's that simple. And so that's where I like this situation. You're going to be a brave person to start in, but in those deeper leagues, in those leagues where you've got literally you're starting. I had a league this week where I had to start. I'll give you some of the names I had to start. Literally, my roster was completely hampered, and I had to start. Let's find it. I actually got a win in this league, by the way.
Those are the best ones when you're like, how
Because
this is in time. How did I pull this out? I'm smart.
I had to start Barner at tight. I had to start Barner in my flex. I had to start Mike Gesicki because they were literally the only people there, and Jake Bobo, and I still got a win.
Very nice.
Yeah, I mean, quite ridiculous. That's because, Gesicki got 27 points because Eric All went out for the season with an ACL. But in those situations, Mason Tipton's the guy. Like, I'd much rather start him than like Colby Parkinson or a second tight end or a low end running back. Like, I just think, if you're going to start someone who's going to score like 5 points, what are you got to lose? Like, yes, the floor is 0, but actually you could catch fire, and he could put up like a wide receiver 6 week, like as in like wide receiver 6 overall, and finish in the top 6. Like, he's got that upside because we've seen it. That's the only team that has that kind of specialist role for a deep pass catcher like that.
I think I really like the shout. I think one of the points you touch on there that I really like is we need to remember that a team potentially tanking does not mean that players are not still playing for their NFL futures. Like, even when we think about Derek Carr playing for his contract, like, that's a starting quarterback, but you've got players who are playing to even be in the NFL next year, and they are going to want out and make a name for themselves. If Mason Tipton shows out in these next few weeks, he sticks on the roster for next season, and then he's guaranteed an extra few million for his family for next year. Like, these players are always going to want to go out and win games, and that's always going to be the case no matter what's happening with a team. Let's
and not to mention, Derek Carr's probably had the worst 24 hours of Twitter coverage that anyone has had for quite some time, with Michael Thomas going at him, Chris Olave's brother going at him, and now this news that he is the first quarterback to have lost to 31 teams in the NFL. Like, and he's got his head coach fired for the second time, because don't forget that Dennis Allen was Dennis Allen's quarterback when he got fired from the Raiders 10 years ago. So it's not been a good 24 hours for Derek Carr, and he'll want to overcome that.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to move us into the next section. So thinking about what we learnt each week. So we like to reflect, rewind, some might say, on the week before to think about what we learnt. So I will kick us off of what I learnt from week 9. And I think this is an interesting point of theory in terms of, and potentially this is a DFS thing as well, in terms of the matchups that you chase. Blowing teams out does not necessarily mean a great fancy performance for the quarterback. So looking at this week, 2 of the biggest blowouts, although the Packers obviously didn't end up being so much because they managed to score late on and keep it relatively close. But Jared Goff, in a really convincing win for the Lions, was the QB 25. Kyler Murray, the Bears only scored 9 points, and Kyler Murray was the QB 28. You even look back to last week where the Lions put up 50 on the Titans and Jared Goff was the quarterback 20. 2 of the top 5 quarterbacks were in a loss, and all except Joe Burrow was a 1-score game. So I think it's definitely about, like, what you want is your quarterback to be consistently having to pass until the end of the game. There's a reason why Matthew Stafford and Geno Smith ended up with relatively good fantasy weeks from what for 3 quarters was actually pretty poor. Geno Smith was, I think, the QB 3 or 4 on the week, and he threw 3 picks. But because that game was close, he had to keep going right until the end. We talk a lot about garbage time points, but at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how you get the points. There's a reason why Dak Prescott has always been a consistently good fantasy quarterback, even when the offense actually hasn't been fantastic. I think you need to make sure that if you are in a matchup where, so take the Lions as an example, they're obviously have come up a couple of times here, where the running game is probably going to absolutely blow out the opposition. If you have the Lions against the Panthers and Jahmyr Gibbs and Dave Montgomery are just going to get 150 yards each on the ground, Jared Goff probably isn't the best start. Like, even if might get to the red zone and throw a touchdown, if you don't have to throw that often, you're going to struggle in fantasy. So I think it's just something about matchup selection. There's a reason in DFS that we look at bringbacks as well and look at, playing on both sides and what we think is going to be a high scoring game on both sides of the coin. It is slightly rare that you get something like Joe Burrow this week where he threw for 5 touchdowns in an absolute blowout, but all of the touchdowns were through the air. That doesn't tend to happen too often. Paul, I'm going to come to you next. What did you learn from week 9?
I learned this week that a lot of this, we all play this game and we all are very much degenerates for this game. But like, you have to remember that a lot of this is just luck. So I'm looking at so many rosters and I've got so many injuries. And I'm just like, the teams that are doing really well are teams that have been struck with less injuries. So you have to try and remember that a lot of this is luck. So, and I'm finding it really funny in best ball, because best ball, you really sort of see how bad your team can be if you don't play the waiver wire. So, Murph, I will go to your contest, the FFCC. Now, in that league, I am doing quite well. I'm in the last 16 of the plate. I had to start Stephon Diggs this week because all of my team, or all of my wide receivers, are on IR. I've got Rashee Rice, IR. I've got Rashid Shaheed, IR. I've got Deebo Samuel's on a bye this week. I've got Stephon Diggs, he's on IR. And, I'm still doing well, but that's all luck. I'm still there because I've got a bit of luck, and just, you have to remember, guys, that we do this for a lot of fun, and don't be heartbroken because all of your best players are out. Just keep going, keep putting people in. And like you guys were saying, it kind of like reflects on all that. Like, we're at that point now where the less keen players sort of start to slide off. Just keep going. This is that time where you can sneak into that playoffs, grab yourself that 6th spot in that playoff bracket, and all of a sudden you put together. Before you know it, Mason Tipton is winning you a league because he's got, he's your first round of the playoff, and he goes for three receptions, 130 yards, and 3 touchdowns, and sneaks you into the semis, and you're just going, oh, here we go, And then you message your Murph going, oh, what a legend! You told me about Mason Tipton. Nobody else did in the world. But just try and remember that, it is a lot of luck, and we're at that point now where your injuries are probably taking over your team. You've got no more room for IR spots. You've got no more room for anything. Just get rid of the dead wood. If they're out for the season, you don't need them. Drop them. Just throw anyone in there. Anyone is more value than that player right now in redraft.
Yeah, I absolutely love this one. And I think it's a very fair point that so much of this ends up being random, and we can only try and work within that chaos. I also want to say on the Mason Tipton thing that I did text Murph the week after you came on last time because you were the only person to bring up Jalen Naylor as a player that you're into, and he just immediately scored a touchdown. And I was like, maybe you do know what you're talking about with this thing. This is amazing. So Mason Tipton probably a priority waiver player.
Murph, maybe you do know what you're talking about.
Murph, you're smart.
Up to this point, you talk shit. Jalen Naylor is like, wow, this guy really knows what he's talking about.
I just wing it, right? Literally every week. I just think, who is someone no one's talking about? And eventually one of these will hit. I'll never forget, right? What
I love. Okay, well, we're going to put this show out later, and it's going to go. Murph says bench Ceedee Lamb and start Mason Tipton. Okay, that's what this show is going to be called. Bench Ceedee Lamb, start Mason Tipton
all day long.
5-yard Murph, done.
and then watch if it comes off. That's it. I might as well quit. It will never get better than that.
1 catch, 7 yards and a touchdown, and Ceedee Lamb's out this week with a shoulder injury, and you're going, told you, nailed it.
So, I will never forget my first season doing 5-yard rush, right? I was doing it with Stocks, and we were about probably like my 4th or 5th episode, right? And I was like, right, I'm going to put out there a crazy prediction, right? And I've always had a soft spot for Mark Sanchez, right? So I was like, I wanted to start a campaign to get Mark Sanchez a team, and then 4 weeks later he signed for the Commanders. literally nowhere. And someone picked it up. I can't remember who it was, but I think it was like Sporting News or somewhere had seen these tweets and then had listened to the episode. I have to dig it out somewhere. It was somewhere, and I was like, "Whoa, this is mad!" And like we literally just, sometimes if you manifest these things, they happen. Jalen Naylor, for the wrong reasons, had turned out early season to be quite a good player, because it's like, well, when we talked about it, it's like who's who's someone that's like so super sleeper? Well, Jordan Addison's got this drunk driving thing. You know, there's been injuries on that roster. There's no TJ Hawkinson. Like, if something happens, Jalen Naylor's he's got to be a guy. He's done well in camp. And then, yeah, first week scores a touchdown. And he's kind of been one of those weird, like, viable. Rashard Bateman's been another one of these, right? Sort of weirdly viable, almost like you need a touchdown guy. You throw a dart. But, yeah, Tips is an interesting one for that reason. Like, I think, I just, for me, when I play to win. And so, like, some people are so scared to lose. So they'll start guys thinking, okay, I know who Braylon Allen is, so I'm just going to put Braylon Allen in the lineup. And you're just like, Braylon Allen's going to score like 4, 5, 6 points.
Yeah.
Like, can you really not think to start anyone better than that? Like, for me, I just have to throw a hero shot in. And yeah, they don't work quite often or not, but the way I look at it is it's the price of doing business. Like, I'm very analytical in how I do things. So it's like, well, look, I'm playing with 6 points that Braylon Allen's realistically going to get me. So if the worst case scenario is I'm down 6, more than likely, Tipton's going to make a catch. So if he makes a catch for like 20 yards, that's 3. So really now I'm playing with 3 points. Yeah, I'll spin it because the outcome is 20 points the other way and it's costing me 3 to 6. You do that trade. Like, you just have to think about taking the handbrake off and thinking about, especially in those matchups where you're going to lose. Like, in a matchup where you're heavily favorite, then yeah, play safe, like all day long. But in a matchup where you're going to lose, why lose playing safe? Like, oh no, I only lost by like 18. Whether you lose by 1 or whether you lose by 18, you still lose. Like, throw a chaos player. I won a game this week. I was projected to lose by 32 points by starting Mike Gesicki and a bunch of no-hopers. Like, it's just one of those things. Like, you just got to throw it out there. And yeah, more often than not, it's not going to work. And Mason Tipton, 98% not going to be a thing. But what about that 2% chance that he is? And you're on it, and you're like, right, that's it. And he wins you a week. And that week could be the week that gets you the win you need to get into the playoffs. And then once you're in, you only need a CJ Anderson moment. You know, for those that haven't been playing fantasy football as long, CJ Anderson took over from Todd Gurley. He was picked up for nothing mid-season. Joe Flacco last season, right? There's always a guy who, coming into the playoffs, has done nothing. Literally sat on a couch, done nothing, gets signed, and runs away with it. If you've got that player on your roster, you win a time. And literally by being the lowest ranked team in there, you've got the best chance of getting him. So, yeah, I just think go for the win.
I think Joe Flacco's heading back to his sofa, mate. But
he could be.
And also, you remind me of like a Coach Bombay from the Mighty Ducks. Get a team of no hopers, put them together, and go and win a championship. You know,
absolutely right. I just want to be the guy that wins a championship with Jalen Naylor and Mason Tipton, right? That's it.
Oh, I love it. I love it. I think if you should do it, you should do a show dedicated to them players.
I literally have like a roll of honor, have their pictures up and everything. I'll invite them on. They're probably not even famous stuff. I could probably reach out to them and go, hey, do you want to come on? Let's celebrate.
Yeah.
Do you want to tell us what you learnt in week 9, Murph? And then we'll crack on with our. This is because all 3 of us can chat, but whenever we have Murph on, we always end up way behind schedule.
Yeah, I think we should
every podcast I've ever been on.
I think we should have been at this point about 20 minutes ago, but
I'll rattle through this bit, right? So I got a few things I learned. Jordan Love, he's what makes the Packers a contender for the playoffs, but he's also what makes your fantasy team a contender. But he's also that same person that's going to actually kill your team. So if you look at his performances so far this season, they've been great until last week. We're not going to count the Jaguars game where he was injured. But he's played against pretty soft defenses most of the way, with the exception of the Vikings game, which was a bit of a shootout. Whereas we're looking at the back 9, he's got the Bears twice, which is one of the meanest defenses against the worst defense for quarterbacks in the NFL. He's got the 49ers. He's got the Lions again. He's got the Dolphins. He's got the Vikings again. So he's got a really difficult schedule coming in. And just one to be a little bit wary of that Jordan Love, if you're going to sit here and ride Jordan Love, you've had a taste now this week that he could hurt you. He could really hurt you. Like the fantasy playoffs for Jordan Love are, well, the run to the playoffs is quite bad. It's the Bears, the 49ers, the Dolphins, and the Lions. If you get into the playoffs with him, it's actually quite a nice schedule. It's the Seahawks, which isn't too bad, and then the Saints, which is a delicious matchup in week 16. But he does have the Vikings in week 17. So just keep an eye. Always good idea just to have a plan B to Jordan Love. What I will say as well is Josh Jacobs, right? Josh Jacobs had 52 rushing yards over expected on Sunday, which is insane. Like, most running backs don't end up with that for a season. He did it in one game. Like, it's mad. So a lot of people are going to look at the box score and go, oh, Josh Jacobs had a really good game. Oh, fire him up. He's going to be RB1 rest of the season. Temper expectations. They're against really good defenses. Yes, he broke off some big runs, but, you know, these things do regress to the mean. So just be a little cautious on him because that efficiency is not going to be sustainable. I had to pull this up. Daniel Jones just needs to be benched for sanity reasons. He is the first quarterback since the year 2000, because that's as far back as records go, that managed to throw a passing touchdown and have 0 passing yards at the half. Like...
Can I throw another crazy stat at you?
Go on then.
I'm going to give you a list of players with more passing touchdowns than Daniel Jones at the MetLife Stadium since the 1st of the 1st, 2023.
Go on
Okay?
then.
Aaron Rodgers, Zach Wilson, Tyrod Taylor, Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, Dak Prescott, Tommy DeVito, Sam Darnold, Jacoby Brissett, Pat Mahomes, Tim Boyle, Jordan Love, Trevor Siemian, Geno Smith, Marcus Mariota, Matthew Stafford, Tua Tagovailoa, Mac Jones, Desmond Ridder, and Bo Nix.
Brilliant. I got one more.
That's his home stadium.
I got one more for you.
Go.
In the distance
Mason
between
Tipton.
in the time between the passing touchdown before the one he scored, the one he threw on Sunday and Sunday, the Chiefs have won 2 Super Bowls.
Stupid.
It's actually stupid now. So the Giants last week, and the reason I say is that this is a Malik Neighbors message, is that the Giants last week, or I say last week, yesterday, were minus 14.5 passing, minus 14.5% passing over expected, which means they should have passed the ball 14.5% more than they did, right? To give you an idea how biblically bad that is, that there's one mark since week 6, which has been below that, and that was the Panthers in week 6. So, like, the problem with Daniel Jones is not only that he's not good, but actually he's going to harm Malik Neighbors. So, you know, for all the Malik Neighbors truthers out there, we need Daniel Jones to be benched. Browns are going to be a 3-headed monster. I know they're on bye this week, but this is a good opportunity if Elijah Moore's out there, but Judy, Tillman, Moore. There's not really a clear favorite. They've all kind of split the air yards between them. Judy got 32% and Moore got 27% of the air yards. Tillman was 29%. So really, they're kind of really all close. Targets were 9 for Moore, 11 for Tillman, 11 for Judy, but Moore had the best yards after the catch over expected. So I think Elijah Moore's out there in quite a few leagues. You could probably stash him for a week. I think compared to some of the names out there, it's probably not a bad one. And then this is a Matt Eberflus message. So Matt Eberflus is an absolute fraud. Like, the keys is a fraud. He needs to go. He needs to go for the sake of DJ Moore and Keenan Allen and Caleb Williams and Roman Dunze, who is criminally underusing it. Did you see the play yesterday where Caleb is scrambling and DJ Moore just walked off?
Yeah.
Did you see that? He walked to the sideline mid-play. He's just like, I'm done with this. See you later. And then he body checked Caleb Williams. Yeah, body checked him. Like, he's limping. So, like, Caleb Williams gets a big hit. He's limping to the sideline and literally drops the shoulder and just shoulders into him. Like, it's not always good. And so him and Shane Waldron are 40. Well, him and Matt Eberflus is 14 and 28. So Shane Waldron's obviously there as the OC, if that's what he does. These are the quarterbacks that they've managed to beat. Trey Lance and the Monsoon, Davis Mills, Mac Jones and Bailey Zapp as a combination. Sam Howell, Brian Hoyer, Bryce Young, Josh Dobbs, Jared Goff. Okay, fair. Decent quarterback. But it was in sub-zero temperatures. Kyler Murray, Desmond Ridder, Will Levis, the Rams, and Matt Stafford. But there was no Cooper Kupp, no Puka Nacua, and half the O-line was missing. Andy Dalton, Trevor Lawrence in London. And they are 0-18 on the road on Sunday games with Matt Eberflus as the head coach.
That bit is insane.
0-18 on the road. Like, they are terrible. Like, and they are wasting really good players. And it's just like, they need to go. Like, they just need to go. But this is the Bears cycle. They sit there. They take they have a head coach. They then draft a quarterback, waste the quarterback's first year, but go, okay, coach needs one more year, give him the second year, stinks it up, they let him go. Then a new coach comes in, rookie quarterback can't handle the system, so then they fire him, and they bring in another head coach, and they go, well, we need a new quarterback because this one's not worked. And this is the cycle. It was, Justin Fields. It happened before with Mitch Trubisky. Like, this is the Bears. It's just a soap opera rerun all over and all over again. But this time it's impacted fantasy because you've got Roman Dunze, Keenan Allen, DJ Moore, JohnDe Swift. You've got all these players that are significantly fantasy relevant. So, yeah, we need Matt Eberflus to go. So, yeah, I didn't just learn he was a fraud, but I did learn that he was 0-18 on the road in Sunday games. And I did manage to find the names of the quarterbacks that he'd beaten, and it's not an impressive roster. Other than you've made a good point about teams that are very limited in fantasy relevant players. Like, we should start fading those teams as much as possible unless you're going to take a wildcard punt on them.
Lovely stuff. And that list, the two lists of the Daniel Jones list and the Matt Eberflus list are huge features of this week. I'm a big fan of them. So talking of features, let's get into our regular features. So stud, scare, and wildcard. For new listeners, we pick a stud of the week, a scare of the week, and a wildcard of the week. The loser each week gets a point, and at the first show after the Super Bowl has to do a forfeit with a monologue of the other two's choosing. Now, in the absence of Hannah for the next few weeks, we are getting the guest to do her picks for her. I'm also going to ask you, Murph, to choose the loser because you are the most objective person. What I will say is currently Hannah is on 6 points. Paul and I are both on 10. So if we could wrangle our way into equaling that out, that would be wonderful. So first up, we have our stud of the week. I want to add, by the way, I actually think in advance Hannah has lost a couple of these, which is fun. So stud is our regular feature where we talk about an under-the-radar player who we think is going to smash this coming week. I said Jacoby Myers, who was wide receiver 15, 8 catches for 105 yards. You hear what I was saying earlier about bad teams having to throw in garbage time. Paul said Tank Dell, wide receiver 13, 6 catches, 126 yards. So very well done this week, Paul. And you've done even better in the scare. We'll come to that in a second. Hannah went for Raheem Mostert, who was RB27 with 9.8 fantasy points. Murph, who is your loser for this week?
I just think for me, well, the loser of the week it's got to be Raheem Mostert, right? Although, yeah, if I look at rankings, yeah, no, I'd still say it was Mostert. I actually have Mostert around there, and Tank Dell around where he is as well. But yeah, you got to go with them with the point. So yeah, Mostert's the clear loser here.
I saw Paul get nervous that he was about to get a point because last week we had an issue with this.
I've been fuming.
Yeah, I know. I can't. You can't have a loser when the wide receiver catches, gets 126 yards.
Yeah.
What's even better, Murph? We're not going to spoil anything, but somebody picked Tank Dell as this scare because I picked him as a stud, which was even better. But
we're not going to spoil that. I still haven't lost the scares. So our studs of the week. Murph, why don't you kick us off with an under the radar player you think is going to smash?
Yeah, so I've got with Brock Purdy this week. So he's currently quarterback 10 on the season. So he's kind of not really like completely under the radar, but he's a player that most people took as a second QB in fantasy. There's not many that have actively started him throughout the season. And at the same token, he's not really put up, the big totals in terms of weekly finishes. If you look at where he's been, it's 10 points, 15 points. He has a couple of weeks over 20, which have been solid. And then week 8 before the bye, 26 points is his best outing of the season. But he does face Tampa this week, who are coming into Monday Night Football. Don't forget, time recording, they've not played yet or won yet. Let's put a bold prediction out there. Manifest it, right? Is what we've been talking about. Manifesting is they're ranked 32nd in points allowed to QBs. So for me, Brock Purdy is my sort of stud of the week that I'm shooting for.
Lovely stuff. Paul, who are you going with this week?
So I've gone for Jordan Addison, who is coming off. He's coming off quite a decent week. He scored 16.1 points this week. He is currently sat at wide receiver 63 on the season, and the Minnesota Vikings are playing the Jacksonville Jaguars, and I feel like anyone playing the Jacksonville Jaguars can score plenty of points, and I'm all for targeting anyone that are playing the Jags. So Jordan Anderson, wheels up, baby.
I absolutely love this one. When I was looking through as well. So actually, in terms of what we spoke about earlier about matchups, the Jags and the Vikings, I think the Vikings are the worst team against the pass in terms of fantasy points allowed to wide receivers, and the Jags are like 3rd or 4th. So this matchup, if anyone aside from Brian Thomas Jr. is healthy, you can look to start there as well. But BTJ, if he's healthy, should be a smash. I've gone with a player who, if we'd said before the season, definitely under the radar, definitely more on the radar at the moment. But Tyrone Tracy, he's the RB33 on the season. It's clearly his backfield. He's had, in the last 5 weeks, he's had over 15 rushing attempts. Through the last 5 weeks, RB18, RB5, 39, 7, and 32. Now, obviously, this isn't a great offense, but who are they playing this week? That means I might have told you to start a running back. It's the Carolina Panthers. You can start any running back against the Carolina Panthers. They're the worst rushing defense in the NFL. And I expect Tyrone Tracy, with a huge amount of workload, or with the majority of the workload, to have a very decent week in week 10. Let's move on to our scares. So this is a hyped up player who we think could be disappointing for the week to come. This one, so I'm going to start off. Now, we already said that I was Tank Dell, wide receiver 13 as above. I don't feel too bad about this because I think people were hyping up Tank Dell in a completely empty wide receiver field as, a top 5 wide receiver, and he didn't quite make it there. But obviously the volume was incredible. Paul, you absolutely crushed this one. So you went with Kyle Pitts. Drake London scored a touchdown, then left the game in the first quarter. Paul must be sitting there thinking that Kyle Pitts prediction is over. And it wasn't. He only caught 1 ball and finishes the Titan 38. And then we have the lovely, lovely Hannah, who it's not quite your Malik Neighbours prediction, Paul, where he ended up as the wide receiver 1 on the week. But Hannah did go with Zay Flowers, who had 127 yards and 2 touchdowns and finished as the wide receiver 3. So Murph, who do you think is the biggest loser in this one?
Yeah, unfortunately, Zay Flowers. I totally bought the logic on this. If I had to sit here at last week and predict this, I would have said Hannah was probably in safe territory. But that she's unfortunately, that is unfortunate. That he's ended up as the wide receiver 3 this week.
It's not great. Keep us going.
As Hannah would say, she trusted the process, and what you just said, Murph, is her process was right.
100%.
It just went wrong.
If I'd gone off my rankings right at the start or at the game at kickoff, I actually had Dell at 13. So that's where I had Dell. So I was like, okay. I had Pitts at tight end 7 or 8, I think. I had Zay Flowers in the late 20s. So like the process was right, the matchup and the game script kind of felt like they weren't going to put the ball in the air. I mean, there was a big play in there that accounts for nearly half the yards as well. That kind of, so it's one of those weird ones that doesn't go in. It's a completely different prediction, and then I think Lewis would have been sweating it. But yeah, them the breaks, as they say. Them the breaks.
Sorry, exactly. Hannah. So, Murph, who is your scare for this week?
It's Marvin Harrison Jr. against the Jets. Wide receiver 19 on the season. For me, not starting him. This is an unstartable matchup. I genuinely think Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to be somewhere between wide receiver 46 and wide receiver 60.
Wow.
So I'm just like, against the Jets, this is just not... It's difficult to pass on the Jets, so the coverage is not great. This Jets D is stingy. One of the best passing defenses in the NFL, if not the best in the NFL. So, given the fact that Marvin Harrison Jr. has had he's got 2 games that elevate him up to wide receiver 19. I'm out this week. He's sitting everywhere for me this week. He's not startable anywhere for me this week.
Marvin Harrison Jr. is a bust, says Murph. Paul, who's your scare of the week? Is it MHJ as well? Do you think it's rubbish?
No, I'm nothing personal here, because I've just realised that Murph's gone for a Cardinals player and I've gone for a Bucks player. So I'm just gonna So my sit this week is Baker Mayfield. No, I just think they got a tough matchup. They're playing the 49ers. I think that the 49ers haven't been firing on all cylinders, but I think injuries to Baker's sort of receiver core could leave him in a bit of a sticky situation, and I just think this is going to be one where you've got to sort of, I don't know, go in with an open mindset about it. Baker's been great this season, and he's currently QB 3 on the season, 2 on the season, and I just think this
quite a long way ahead of third.
I just think this week may be one of them where you see him finish lower than sort of QB 15, 16 on the week. So I think
would you like me to read out Baker Mayfield's lines?
you can if you want.
He's had 2. I won't, but I'll read out 2. He's had 2 games where he's not hit 20 fantasy points all season. Week 2
and
against the Lions.
Number 3.
One of those was against the Lions, but he put up 19.8. And then against the Broncos he had 9.5, but the rest 29, 28, 23, 28, 29, 29, 24.
I promise next week, I know you're not on the show next week, but I promise I'll be subtle about it when he finishes as a really low QB. Okay, I promise I'll be subtle about it.
Yeah,
Paul Pickham has never been subtle about anything in his life.
No. Except for Spencer Rattler glass that he's been drinking out of all morning. Or even.
Joe, I did think that said Rattler. Yeah.
Rattler cider.
Yeah,
Spencer Rattler cider. You've become a closet Saints fan.
Yeah, I just like to support shit teams. The Rams are next.
That was a shot out of nowhere.
That was a shot out of nowhere.
I have gone with Jaden Daniels. I've decided to go big or go home. So this week, the Commanders play against the Pittsburgh Steelers. They have only conceded 20 points in a game, or 20 plus points in a game once in this season. Now, obviously, they haven't played against the best slew of quarterbacks, but they also only have 2 games where they haven't recorded multiple sacks on a quarterback. They have a fierce defensive line. They are conceding I think it's the 2nd or 3rd fewest points to the quarterback position. They've not allowed a quarterback rushing touchdown all year long, and they are the lowest by a fair amount in terms of QB rushing yards allowed. Jaden Daniels obviously been an absolute superstar this season. This is going to be the best defense he's played against. So if he can come out and dominate against this defense, fair play to him. I just think there's a chance he could struggle this week against the Steelers. Let's close it off with our wild card of the week. So this is our regular feature. We suggest something, or actually I should change this. 2 things. We always do 2 things that we think could happen in the week to come. The less likely, the better. Lewis Wood, smart man. I said Broncos Ravens goes for over 50 points. It was 51 points, which is correct. That's more.
The Broncos really contributed to that.
Yeah, I know. I also said that Taysom Hill would be a top 5 tight end, and he was a tight end 3. So well done, me. Paul, you said the Browns get back-to-back wins without Deshaun Watson. They didn't. They lost quite heavily to the Chargers with Jameis Winston having. Yeah, Jameis Winston had the other side of the Jameis Winston with multiple picks. You also said if Jordan Love is out, Malik Willis finishes as a top 10 quarterback on the week. Well, Malik Willis didn't get any points this week, Paul, because Jordan Love did play.
If I wasn't so busy on Sunday, I seen it and I was going to be like, oh, I'm just going to put something else in there, but it's such a busy day on Sunday, I didn't get around to it. So
that's okay. So obviously you got both of yours wrong. One of yours as a didn't even end up being qualifying. But we'll see what Murph thinks about this, because Hannah said, and she obviously was trying to sort of caveat the fact she was at the Bengals game and say, well, if the Bengals get blown out by the Raiders, at least I get some points in this game, or won't get any points in this game. Hannah said all of the AFC North lose this week. 2 of them won, the Bengals and the Ravens, obviously with a loss from the Browns, we said earlier. The big one here is Gardner Minshew finishes as a top 5 quarterback. He was the quarterback 30 on the week. But the more embarrassing stat here is that he wasn't even the highest scoring quarterback on his own team, because he was benched midway through the game and Desmond Ridder outscored him. I'm intrigued to know your thoughts, Murph, as to who is the loser here, whether Hannah's Gardner Minshew prediction being so wrong elevates her, or whether the fact that Paul didn't even submit a prediction.
Yeah, the thing is, right, I think the fact that I get what Hannah's trying to do, right, is she's trying to, again, we're going back, the word of the day, people, is manifest, right? She is manifesting a Bengals victory and she tanked her own submission to make that happen. Our game respects game. I get that. Paul, come on, you had to submit one. And also, yeah, I just think if you had said that, if you hadn't done that and if you'd gone with anything else, I'd have probably would have said Hannah. But effectively, I have to count yours as like it did not start.
Yeah,
because it never got out of the blocks. So, and also, I'm representing Hannah this week as the fantasy queen, and I can't give her 3 L's. Like, that would be totally wrong. So yeah, Paul, sorry, mate.
I'm not gonna lie, Murph. I'm not gonna lie. If you weren't here, she definitely would have got 3 L's. Okay.
Yeah,
the only reason she's not getting that is because you're here.
Yeah, well, that's
fine.
But you got to think it would. If you'd have given her 3 L's, then she'd be on 9 points, and me and Lewis would still be on 10, so she still wouldn't be in a losing
100%. But let's not forget, yours didn't get out of the blocks. It's like if this was a race, if this was a race, she fell at the first hurdle. You never got out of the blocks.
No, she fell over. She fell over, then reversed.
No. Lewis was so far ahead, he ran this backwards and then actually was doing the hurdles like Saquon Barkley.
Mate, how have we gone through a show we haven't mentioned the backwards?
That's why I had to bring it up. You see what I did? That was a built-up reference upon reference.
Yeah,
I built up to that moment.
I would break both of my legs and somehow also an arm if I were to attempt that backwards hurdle.
Yeah.
It's one of the most astounding feats I've seen in a football field. But what's also astounding is that our scores on the doors currently see Hannah in first place with 8 points, Lewis in second place with 10 points, and back where he belongs in last place is Paul with 11 points. So let's see how we can do this week. Murph, I'm going to start off with you. What are your wild cards of the week?
I've got Brock Purdy to finish as the QB4 or better. The NFC West will end up with 3 teams on 5 wins at the end of the weekend. Cardinals will be just behind because they'll be on 5 losses because the Rams are going to win, the Cardinals are going to lose. However, the 49ers will be the only team that hits the over. And I've put the over-unders in here because if they change, I don't want to be responsible for them. So I've done them as the lines, as Vegas has them right at time of recording. Right? I'm not having Hannah lose on a technicality because the lines changed.
Listen, Murph, okay? You are safe because I'm starting to regret my decision of guests because I know it's Mags next week and Mags will do whatever to make sure that I'm losing anyway, okay?
Yeah,
so
100%.
don't worry about it, okay? So there won't be a technicality. Mags will,
Well, there we
will
go.
be
Well,
like, oh yeah, Hannah wins.
I've put it in here. The 49ers games, only the 49ers game will be the over. The Rams with an over-under 50.5 will be under, and the Cardinals 45.5 will be under.
Lovely. I love an NFC West special for the weirdest division in football this year.
There you go. Just because you two are here. Like, I could have gone out there and I could have done something NFC Southie, but that's just lame. I could have gone and done something about the AFC, but no one cares about the AFC. It's boring. All the action's in the NFC.
100%.
Too many good players.
Yeah.
Where are the weird and bad players?
Yeah.
Paul, what's your wild card of the week?
So I am going to say that the Carolina Panthers beat the Giants, and this week they got the Saints head coach sacked, and next week they're going to get the Giants quarterback benched. And I think that they beat the Giants in Germany. They end up benching Daniel Jones. And for fantasy, what am I going to say for fantasy? I'm going to say that I'm going to go for something absolutely crazy. I'm going to say that Kyle Pitts finishes as a top 3 tight end this week.
Going back to the picks, well.
Let's go for it.
That's spicy.
And it's very nice to see the amount of preparation that you've done for the show with your, and what shall I do for fantasy this week?
Oh, mate, I literally walked in from work and then I've taken the little lad to football training and I get home from his football training at like 7:30 and then I've just come straight up here. So it's just been one of them days. So.
It's great commitment. It's great commitment. I have my dinner next to me, which I haven't eaten because there wasn't time. This is my dinner here. I'm very excited to eat that after the show. I'm also very excited for my wild card of the week, which is the Jets beat the Cardinals by more than a touchdown. I don't think we've ever had a touchdown prop as our wild card of the week, which I thought was fun. Demarcus Robinson nearly won me a bunch of money this week. I had a touchdown acca with Trey McBride, Demarcus Robinson, and Evan Ingram, which was about £340 off a $5 bet. And when the Jags were marching down the field against the Eagles, given that Evan Ingram won us a huge amount last week, Paul, on basically the last play of the game, I was like, here we go, he's doing it again. And then Trevor Lawrence throws a pick. But I've gone back to the well with Demarcus Robinson. I think he scores another touchdown against the Dolphins. So that is going to bring us to the end of the show. Murph, thank you so much for joining us. If people want to hear more from the Queen of Fantasy, where can they find you?
You can find the Queen of Fantasy at 5 Yard Rush, available on all good podcast and YouTube hosted platforms. We're approaching episode 900 soon. By the end of the season, we'd hit 900 episodes, which is, let's just say, it never gets old. There's some timeless classics in there. So if you want to go back into the vault, there's some absolute wild guests and things over the season. But yeah, I'm on most days breaking down. Probably the bit of content for listeners that they probably will want to check out is my Fantasy Football Bible. I basically break down every single game by betting line, game script, and therefore every single fantasy relevant player. And it's over 2 pods, so Thursday and Friday. So it's a good prep for the weekend. And also I'd be remiss, and I'm contractually obliged to tell people about my Fantasy Pros column, which is on wide receiver cornerback matchups. I talked about how sterling a job I do by getting JSN as a sit this week and him smashing it as the wide receiver 1. So if you want all that really good like prediction stuff, then that's available on Fantasy Pros. Just search like Murph for fantasy football, and it normally is like the first result. So there's lots of good stuff on there.
Wonderful. And I can absolutely recommend that Thursday, Friday show. It's an absolute must listen to start off the week. It's always a pleasure having you on, Murph. Thank you so much for joining us. So thank you so much for tuning in. If you've enjoyed the show, even if you haven't, make sure to subscribe and follow us at X at Wildcard Rewind. Head on over to our YouTube channel, search for us at Fancy Wildcard Podcast Network. Make sure you give a like and a subscribe. We will see you next week where we rewind week 10. Have a great time. Thank you for listening.